live. Let's see. Uh, Cameron, are you there? Can you
I
hear me?
am here. How are
Oh,
you?
wonderful. So it looks like we got this technology thing worked out.
Yay, good. How
Thank
are
you
you
for
today?
coming on the show today and hanging out with me. It's we got a whole bunch of things to talk about. So you're in Alberta, and recently, you guys followed what's been going on in Toronto, in Ontario, and you got yourself a new premier.
Yes, we do.
And
And he's very similar to your premier.
yes, yes, they seem to be very similar, and it's kind of interesting because it's been what, maybe a week, 2 weeks on the job, and there's already protests going on.
Oh, well, there's already big changes going on. I mean, he just got inaugurated, and yes, our system that we were developing here is taking a pounding from the conservatives already.
Hmm.
And and it's really interesting, really sad, but people are standing up. So there's a lot of proactive work going on right
So
now.
how exactly, I know in Ontario we were in sort of a situation wherein a lot of people voted against the person who was the premier at the time, as opposed to for the person who got the job, because there was a lot of people, there was a lot of dislike for Catherine Wynne at the time. Is that a similar situation that happened there? Because here, this Rob Ford Doug Ford was brought in, and there was no clear mandate. And a lot of people voted saying, "Hey, you know what? We don't want her. We want to try somebody else. Bring him in." And when his mandate started to be clear, then we started to see a lot of protests, a lot of angry people. The changes that were being made here was begun to look kind of really scary. But there, I think he had a pretty mapped out platform, right?
Well, no, they didn't. Actually, the conservatives didn't have to say much of anything. They knew they had a really big base. And in some ways, it was similar to Ontario. Yes, they didn't have a really broad plan for anything. Basically, it was forcing other provinces to take pipelines through
Yeah.
and subsidizing the oil industry again. Now, the big difference is that Kathleen Wynne had done a particularly awful job in the last few years before she got voted out.
Hmm.
Rachel Notley had been doing fantastic, and
So
the
what was
one
it? What was the catalyst? Was it the pipelines? Is it BC? Was it
partly
the
it was
federal
the
government?
pipelines, partly it was the pipelines, partly it was some of the more leftist programs that were going on, like the daycare programs and stuff, for whatever reason, really upset the right wing. But no, how to say it best? There is a delusion in Alberta that Jason Kenney will be able to bring back 130,000 jobs and
Hmm.
force two pipelines through, one through BC, one through Quebec. And that is the main thing people voted for, and those are things that will never happen or are extremely unlikely to happen.
The pipelines are pretty. Uh, it's a pretty difficult situation to navigate because, one, you have so much concern about climate change, and
Absolutely.
the world theoretically is supposed to be moving away from fossil fuels, and so
Yes.
spending these billions of dollars building the pipelines to create these to get them to market seems almost counterproductive to the direction that um, Canada wants to go and the rest of the world is trying to go.
Absolutely.
So
But
how do
Alberta,
you? It's almost like that same rhetoric of from down south when talking about bringing back coal jobs.
absolutely, it's the same thing. And one has to remember that Alberta is the epicenter of oil industry propaganda. It's where they're hitting the hardest because it's one of the most valuable regions on earth. Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Canada in that order,
Okay.
as far as oil reserves go. Now, the biggest problem with the pipeline that Albertans don't understand at all is that that bitumen pipeline will effectively double the tar sands output in Alberta.
Hmm.
The tar sands output is one of the most polluting things on the face of the planet. So we should be reducing that as much as possible, not trying to double it. So if they were building a pipeline to send refined oil, I would be against that as well, but that would probably be through by now. The fact that they want to send diluted bitumen down this pipeline is a big, big source of contention. But I think Rachel Notley and the NDP in the province were really proactive in getting these train cars and stuff to ship oil out, because the pipeline isn't really going to be a viable option in the end of this. No BC premier could support the pipeline and expect to get reelected. And it is very much the same thing in Quebec. If a premier decides he is or she is going to support a pipeline going through Quebec, they will likely lose the next election, because Quebecers have seen no benefit in the pipeline at all. As well, they should see no benefit.
So there's this contention between Quebec and BC not wanting the pipelines to go through their territories. So why would people, I guess, buy into the rhetoric that Jason Kenney is going to be able to make this happen? Because like Jason Kenney, they can't, like, Alberta can't impose on BC what needs to happen there, and it can't impose on Quebec on what needs to happen there.
Well, to be honest, here in Alberta, it's really wishful thinking. It's a mass popular delusion that the oil industry will come back to the strength it was 30 years ago, and that will never happen. The value of oil might increase, but the need for oil will decrease. It might be increasing a little bit at the moment, but every other place on the planet is trying to replace oil as quickly as possible, and we need to get with that program. It's nearly impossible in Alberta. When they put in electric charging stations, people surround them with trucks so people with electric cars can't charge their cars.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Things like that are just absolutely childish, but they think that they're somehow doing the oil industry a favor by cutting off intelligent people's access to power for their vehicles. It's beyond all reason, but it is what we're dealing with in this province. So I could spend all day, every day, railing against that, but lately I'm trying to be more proactive.
So tell me what like, okay, so what's Alberta to do? Just leave the oil in the ground and close up shop and call it a day and move on to something else?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Alberta, we might as well accept that Albertans don't mind living in a toxic waste dump. We can try to make it better for Albertans, and progressive Albertans can help that along the way. But we can keep in mind that if Albertans want refineries, well, oil has to be refined somewhere on the planet, so it might as well be where people embrace the idea rather than trying to push it through on some poor person in Newfoundland that doesn't want refineries near them. We don't need to leave all the oil in the ground. We should immediately stop fracking, and we should probably immediately stop with the bitumen mining as well. Both those are incredibly toxic processes and are not helping the climate situation at all.
So a lot of people, so a lot of people listening may not know what fracking is or may not know what bitumen is.
Okay, would you like a quick breakdown of those? Okay, well, fracking, basically, they cut a hole in the ground and they super pressurize hydrochloric acid and tons of water first they drill a bunch of holes and they make a giant crack about 2.5 miles long. Then they force in water, hydrochloric acid, and some other sludgy stuff that draws the oil out of the shale, turns it into a kind of mixed up liquid that they can then suck out of the ground. and turn into oil. Bitumen mining is tar sands. There's
Now, before you go on,
bitumen.
one thing with fracking, there is some concerns around earthquakes and around that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's earthquakes, but the earthquakes are a minor problem. We shouldn't have earthquakes in Alberta, and we're having them now as a result of fracking. But our bigger worry is the most valuable commodity for the future of Canada. Our most valuable resource is fresh water.
Yeah.
Countries are running out of fresh water, and Canada has the most of it. But fracking puts at high risk the aquifers in Alberta or Saskatchewan or wherever the fracking is being done. And these aquifers, if a teaspoon of oil gets into them, it effectively destroys the fresh water source. So when you're doing 2.5 mile splits, when you're doing 100,000 2.5 mile splits in a province, that really ups the risk of polluting some of the aquifers and water tables around. And that is something we cannot afford to do at this point in history, because that water is going to be valuable in a few years.
So for fracking, some of the challenges with that is the possible pollution of the aquifers, as well as the side effects of earthquake.
Yeah, earthquakes, sinkholes, stuff, all sorts of good stuff like that. Like, whoever came up with the idea, it's a really terrible idea, but they obviously cared more about money and oil than they did about the aquifers around. If anybody needs an example, they can look up the water coming out of the ground around the Bakken oil fields in the Dakotas, because now we have they way over fracked the Bakken fields, and now they are paying for it. There is no good drinking water in that part of the Dakotas at all. So in the end, was it worth it for some short-term jobs and a little bit of money? It was not worth. But it was not worth fracking for that.
And so the challenge with bitumen, like, I don't want to spend all of our time talking about the oil issue, but
yeah, we'll try to keep it. We'll try to keep it as brief as possible. But there is some touchstones we need to hit on with the oil before we ditch it completely.
Yeah. So the biggest problems with BC and Quebec is that they don't want the refining happening within their area. And I know BC had some concerns in regards to possible oil spills happening off the coast and what that could do to the shoreline and the wildlife, everything along with that.
The tourist industry, the whales, you name it. Yeah, BC is very on top of that. And BC is also aware that in the end, this is only 50 permanent jobs for them.
Yeah.
So is that kind of environmental destruction potential worth 50 long-term jobs? And no, it isn't. Those people can find other jobs installing solar panels. I don't care. It just isn't going to be a pipeline job.
So I guess to sort of bring the oil piece together here, because the rest of the world is moving away from this, and there are a lot of individuals in Alberta that rely on the oil industry for good paying jobs. What's the alternative for Alberta to do? What can Alberta do in order to, I guess, wean itself off oil? Considering, it's not like they didn't see this coming 10 years ago.
No, well, the fact of the matter is they did see this coming. People were making too much money. It's really easy in Alberta to drop out of school in grade 9, go up north, get a job where you're making way too much money compared to anybody else in Canada. And people here believe that they deserve that somehow by virtue of them being born white and in this place, that they deserve this good fortune of this industry. Now, Alberta will have to wean itself, and it's not going to like it. When Norway put a carbon tax through in 1991, I was there. Nobody complained. It went in gradually up till 2011, and nobody complained. It wasn't a big deal, and it worked. It bloody worked. And Alberta could have done that at the same time. And that money from carbon tax could have gone into renewable industries, which are big job creators at the moment. And another thing Alberta could have done is Alberta could have been doing is investing way more. One of our biggest growing industries in Alberta right now is cannabis and hemp. And those two industries are going to be big money makers as our canola sales were just reduced by 40% this year. And the market is growing for hemp. So those farmers can make that switch and make some money.
So
The cannabis industry
with
is employing thousands of people now.
so what do you think exactly is happening? Like Ontario elected Conservative, Alberta followed, a couple of the provinces seem to be moving in that direction. What exactly is going on? Is it that is it that the federal government is moving things way too fast, too quickly?
Actually, the federal government is not moving quickly enough, in my opinion.
But there seems to be so much pushback.
Oh yeah, but look where the pushback is coming from. We're not dealing with terribly educated people in that. Again, some educated people in Alberta really believe in oil, but that's because they are here in the epicenter of the propaganda. But we're dealing with. I really hate to say it this way, but we're not dealing with the sharpest tools in the shed when it comes to that. To be at this point in history a denier of climate change or denier of climate science at all, you have to be pretty special. I know that you can get information out there that says the Earth is flat, but that does not make the Earth flat, and that's exactly the same with climate change. I could be all day on the internet digging up stuff that says climate change is not a fact. However, I've been flying over Greenland for the last 30 years, and I can see the difference in those ice sheets.
But so then, what exactly is it? Because those leaders keep getting elected, and they get elected, and they start to make those changes. They start to fight, the climate actions. They start to cut social programs. They start to do a lot of the things that a lot of people say that they don't want them to do. So, why are they getting elected?
Okay, Canada has this uncanny ability to reflect its inbred cousins in the South. I don't know why, but look what Americans elected for a president, and it's a really similar thing. Like, look at Donald Trump, look at Doug Ford. These people are. Who votes for that? I wouldn't let them babysit my kids or run a hot dog stand. But they were elected leaders. This is truly amazing. So you've got to think about the level of intelligence of somebody that would vote for that. Not just the level of intelligence. I'm going to sound harsh here, but we're dealing with a level of ignorance and bigotry and hate that you have to be able to elect somebody as hateful as Donald Trump or as hateful as Doug Ford or as bigoted or supported by white nationalists as Andrew Scheer. Who do you have to be to vote for a person that openly supports white supremacists? How could to me, it's confounding. And I've spent a lot of my life in other countries. I've been to a lot of other countries. And when I see that rise in more totalitarian sort of people, I wonder how the hell people are able to vote for that. But they are, and we're dealing with a certain level of ignorance. We're dealing with a certain level of bigotry that, although it's getting less and less over time, it is so inherent in the white majority population in Canada and the United States that we have to try to educate it out as best as possible. But as they're dumbing down the education system in the U.S. and to a degree in Canada, that gets worse and worse. Like people don't get smarter in bad education systems, and that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah. Now, there was a walkout by some students last week
Yay.
I think it was on Friday,
Yep.
wherein they were opposing the Jason Kenney's stance on the LGBT community in terms of outing some of the kids. Now, I know leading up to the election, this was something that he said that he was going to do. There was a lot of controversy around how he became leader of that party. There was controversy and around the LGBTQ community. There were so many controversies in and around that. And I guess this is where a lot of people, like myself, there are a lot of people who don't fully understand because the views that that are being expressed by these leaders are not only are they resonating with some people in society, which anything's going to, I believe, would resonate with anybody. There's always somebody out there that's got something's going to resonate with, but the number of individuals that these things are resonating with, and the fact that so many of these individuals are there's enough of them to vote these people into power. Over the last 6 months, 8 months. Alberta has had a front row seat. North of Canada has had a front row seat in terms of what's been going on in Ontario with all the protests that have been happening based on all the cuts that has been happening. And
every group has to go out and defend themselves in the streets now. Isn't that insane? Every union, every group of kids, every climate action group, our only way to deal with this is in the streets and in the courts.
So how much of a concern is there in Alberta and around social programs being cut? Following I know the Jason Kenney.
It's already happening. They shut down. They actually reset up our Ministry of Culture, Heritage, and Tourism. Tourism and culture are huge industries for Alberta, even though it's a bit of a cultural wasteland. Believe me, we have our festivals, we have our things, and they've been well financed and stuff. Well, the Conservatives, in their first couple days in office, just gutted that entire ministry. It doesn't exist anymore. They also took all the money they could from the arts. Fortunately, our Alberta Foundation is protected from them. So they can't take the money out of that because it's lottery money, so it's not theirs.
So there is a concern that the programs are going to be cut in a similar way. But then the justification on the flip side is
cut right now.
So on the flip side, the justification is, well, all that oil money is not there anymore, so we can't afford this.
So what? That's sort of a middle thing to do. Well, who's going to pay for it? Alberta is still one of the richest regions in the world last year, despite the downturn in the oil industry. This region is one of the wealthiest regions for resources on the planet. So if Norway can have the social programs they have, and Finland can have the social programs they have, we could finance all of Canada for those daycare programs, for those arts programs, for those cultural programs. And culture and tourism actually are huge money makers. Huge. There's way more money in ecotourism these days than there is in hunting guides.
There's also a conversation. One of the major promises that were made was that if BC didn't get in line, then the taps would be turned off.
That's a funny idea. Now, some friends of mine and a friend of mine who's an economist, he's an Australian economist, but we crunched some numbers on what would happen if Alberta did that. First, BC is an oil and gas producing province. So they could likely look after themselves for the most part and get whatever else they need from the United States, which is right beside them as far as gas goes. However, almost every single product we use in Alberta, every piece of fruit, every vegetable, every truck, car, cell phone, whatever comes in from the coast. It is dropped off by boats and trucks in BC. So if BC were to slap an Alberta tariff on everything we use, they would kill us in a month.
So if BC decided to retaliate, then
Absolutely.
Alberta would be in a tougher situation. Now,
Alberta, there's no way Alberta could lose a trade war or could win a trade war with BC. There is no way Alberta could win that.
now,
So nice try, Jason Kenney, but that's one thing we know is never going to happen.
now, this is something that Jason Kenney has blamed Trudeau for.
Yes.
In regards to that, it's Trudeau's fault why the pipeline is not completed, and the carbon tax is being slapped on by them, and it's not constitutional. Although
Yeah.
Saskatchewan just lost their
Yes,
their
they
fight in
did,
court.
and Ontario lost theirs as well.
Oh, they did. Oh, I didn't
Ontario
hear the news on that one.
Yes, the last article I read said Ontario and Saskatchewan both lost their thing. So what the court said in both provinces is that climate change is real. This tax stands.
So he's still saying that he's going to fight this. That the rhetoric that we're hearing is that there's many games to be played.
Yeah.
This is round one.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the thing. Jason Kenney, unlike say, Jason Kenney is not a complete idiot, and he has sat in the federal government. So I think that he actually knows that most of this stuff he's talking about is completely unrealistic. There is no way there's just no way a lot of this is happening. He also knows it's not the federal government's fault that BC doesn't want our bitumen coming through it to their coast. He's painfully aware of all these things. However, he knows that his supporters in this province want to believe in this stuff, so he's playing on their beliefs. I think he knows he's lying, but he's that kind of politician. He doesn't care, and that's a problem we have in the right-left dichotomy. Is the left and center always have morals. They have a little bit of empathy and compassion, so they don't want to hurt anybody. Whereas on the right side, they're really ruthless. They don't care who they hurt along the way, so they're always going to win because they'll do tricks that you and I could never think of.
So if you were, it may not necessarily be a fair question, but if you were, in Jason Kenney's shoes, if you were the one who was elected as leader of the province, how would you address all of these concerns?
Oh, okay. Well, let's take them one at a time. Give me a concern, and I will tell you how I would address it.
Okay, so the pipelines.
The pipeline, I might think of giving up on the pipelines. My last-ditch attempt to try to convince BC would be to say that we'll refine our own oil and we'll send refined oil down the pipeline. That may make BC think about it, but I would look at other ways of getting the oil to market.
Now, there is some concern that really our only option to get our oil to market is we're kind of held hostage by the U.S. right now.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily a good place to be.
No, absolutely not.
So, if BC comes back and BC says nope, we don't want to do it, then
Well, then we'll use our train cars. We'll still be able to get ships are leaving the BC coast with oil in them.
Yeah.
And people and boats are leaving the New Brunswick coast with oil in them. But we're not going to increase that amount of oil. We shouldn't increase that amount of oil. We should take our time, save our resources for when they're more valuable. It's not like the oil's going to go bad in the ground. We can sell it all, but we can sell it all over 100 years instead of 50 years.
So when you look at in terms of all the social programs that are in jeopardy, how would you address those?
Well, I'm a human rights guy, so I would start implementing more social programs. I would take that money from an increased carbon tax on polluting industries, and even a small increase in the carbon tax on Alberta industry would pay for our daycare program, would pay for our after-school care programs. would pay for, actually, if we wanted to take it on a broad scale, we could be paying for advanced education for smarter kids here, and we could be paying for pharmacare for all in Alberta without any problem at all. If we were getting the same royalty on oil as Norway, Canada and particularly Alberta would be golden. We'd have more than enough money for any social program we wanted to implement within reason.
Yeah, but if the province is getting higher royalties, like Norway, some of the other countries, then then the concern is, well, businesses won't want to invest in Alberta.
Well, here's the thing. This is where the oil is. It's not like it's not like a car factory where they can pack it up and move to Mexico. The oil is here. So rather than taking the pittance that we get, we could be getting maximum for our resources instead of the minimum for our resources, and getting a higher royalty, and we would have surplus money right away. So no, the companies, especially the big companies, aren't going anywhere. They will keep their assets in Alberta all the way. The only people that are pulling out, again, Norway, Statoil pulled all their interests out of Alberta for moral reasons. They ethically could not do it, and economically it was a bad investment for the future. So Statoil pulled out for those reasons. But Statoil did not pull out because we demanded a high oil royalty. They thought our oil royalty was a joke. Like, we get less money in Alberta for a royalty than Nigeria does.
Wow.
So of course Norwegians think we're ridiculous.
As somebody who lives in Alberta, and you see the direction that the province is going, what are your concerns?
Oh, my biggest concern is that with this new government, we are in 4 years that are essential to fighting climate change, and this government has no interest, no plan, no anything to help work toward defending the environment at all. And these are 4 crucial years. We don't have many years left to be proactive about this. And unfortunately, there's nothing that I can say or do to the people in that party to make them interested even in trying to fix climate change.
Why do you think that is? Is it that there are just some people who just don't believe in climate change no matter what's going on? I mean, between the floods and the fires and the floods and the forest fires, and
it means nothing to them. It means nothing to them. And in Alberta, we have the highest per capita number of climate change deniers, and they are flat out deniers. If I say climate change is happening, they will send me 10 articles from peacefulwarriors.com or whatever that say climate change is not happening, and they believe that. So as long as they don't believe it, they will do absolutely nothing. They think we're just wasting money putting in electric charging stations and stuff. They do not see that as a good thing in any way.
So, and I guess that's one of the biggest challenges is, addressing someone's belief in the face of evidence. There are people who will believe whatever they want to believe, regardless as to what the evidence says in front of them.
Yes.
When we look in Ontario, our premier seems to be more about big business, the needs of business, as opposed to the needs of the people. And the services that are being cut, the red tape that are being cut for businesses, the gutting of the environmental protection. Like there's so many. There are so many things. There is a program that was supposed to plant a bunch of trees that got dismantled.
Yep.
And so
it's unbelievable. I mean, it's absolutely, not only is it counterintuitive, it's so counterproductive. Like these few little things that we were working towards, which weren't nearly enough, and they're even taking those away.
So what do we do? We just, you've got 4 years left with Jason Kenney. We've got 3.5.
Yes. Well, okay, we do.
What can we do? I mean, for the first time, maybe what happened in was it New Brunswick, where the Greens got a foothold in a little
Oh,
bit.
PEI, Prince
PEI, there you
Edward
go.
Island.
Yeah, where they're now the official opposition. Maybe we'll start to see more of that. I don't know. Like we've got a
Well,
federal election
actually,
that's coming up, and
Actually, the Greens are making big steps forward right now, and that scares me a little bit because where I'm seeing the new Green Party members coming from is the Liberals. The CPC has increased they're ahead right now in the polls.
mhm.
Um, Liberals are at least 10 points behind, but the Green Party are increasing now. Those Green Party people are going to come from the NDP and the Liberals. So unfortunately, I see this fall there being a CPC, a minority government. A minority would be okay. I can live with a minority. I cannot live with a CPC majority. I don't know what I would do in that case. And then I don't see myself throwing my arms up in despair. Like, I'm hitting the streets. I'm working with organizations like Extinction Rebellion and the youth that are hitting the streets all over the world right now. I'm trying to inspire as much of that as possible because I think the youth are where it's at. They're ready in 4 years to vote. But and the other thing is that we're getting teamwork together. I've spoken to some Green Party people and some other people and some lawyers about this, and we may have to throw out some class action suits and some intervention suits just to stop the progress of some of the more destructive conservative policies. So if we can slow those things down for 4 years, we might just get some traction. But that's the only way I see it happening. Like, we're going to have to put some money together because this is not going to be an inexpensive fight. One thing, CPC will gladly take money away from hungry children, but they will gladly put it into lawsuits against environmentalists too.
And I guess that's one of the things also that not a lot of people are talking about, and that is, I know in Ontario there are many lawsuits that are going on right now against the current government
Yep.
because of a lot of the things that they've done. A lot of contracts that they've canceled, a lot of green energy contracts that they've canceled. Like there's been so many that the amount of money that they're going to be spending in court fighting these things, that fighting their own government contracts
Yeah.
and nobody's talking about what that money could be used for otherwise. It's just kind of
Yeah.
crazy to me. Even canceling the carbon tax that the Liberals had put in before, there are financial repercussions for that as well. And
Absolutely.
nobody seems to be having a conversation into what those costs are going to be in the long run.
Oh, we've had those discussions about what the costs are in the long run, and the Supreme Court of Canada just said it's the oil company's responsibility to clean up all the orphan wells and stuff. And that's between $250 and $325 billion cleanup that has to happen in Alberta alone. So we've crunched numbers on that. We have an idea what these things are going to cost. And that money should be coming from things like carbon taxes and things like that so that the government can pick up their end of it. But when you cancel the carbon tax, that money all goes away.
So
Same with
let me just ask you this, and this, I've been, I've talked to a few conservative individuals, and I've never really been able to sort of get a straight answer, and I don't know, whether or not you might be able to make some assumptions, but like, what is the end game here? Is it just to remove all regulations, take away people's safety nets and let businesses do whatever they want, and then people follow along the waysides? Like, I don't understand.
Yes, that seems to be the plan. It's just sort of corporate chaos. It won't, give them the tax breaks and it's supposed to trickle down, but we know that it doesn't work that way. There is no place on earth where trickle down economics has worked ever. So, cutting the corporate taxes and all of that stuff it's not going to inspire more business. It's just going to give the businesses that are already profitable more money. We're not going to see employee wages go up because of this. I don't see that happening at all.
Now, we do have a federal election that's coming up,
Yep.
and the Liberals have been getting beat up a little bit, and with the rise of the Conservative movement provincially, what do you foresee if the Conservatives get in with a majority
Yep.
again?
Well, if conservatives get in with a majority, we are in big trouble. If it's a majority, if it's a minority, we have a fighting chance. I mean, if the conservatives can look at Andrew Scheer sitting with Faith Goldie and still vote for the guy, he can do anything. He could molest children and they'll still vote for him. I just don't get it. And there is nothing we can do to fix those particular people. It's just never going to happen. They're not fixable. So it's trying to educate the ones that are educatable, but we are really at this pivotal time in history where it's science versus religion, or science versus superstition on every single level. And I mean, it's a real fight, but the people who are on the side of science, I think, are giving up trying to even convince these other people of anything, because it's like talking. I get more response talking to my border collie than I do on on Albertans with Accountability Facebook page. It's absolutely incredible.
We haven't really talked much about the NDP.
Yes.
Now,
Yes, we should talk about them. Actually, let's talk about them both provincially in Alberta a little bit, and then federally as well, because yeah, I like both those things.
so the NDP, they kind of lost their footing in Alberta.
Yeah. Oh no, but actually, they have 24 seats in Alberta. NDP never had that in their whole history until the last election. So NDP is actually doing okay here.
Now, considering, so if for some reason, if there's a chance that it does happen that we do end up with the NDP federal government,
Yep.
what are the concerns there?
Well, I don't know if they're 100% prepared to become a government. The NDP's thing has always sort of been the underdog. They were the Seabiscuit early races. The best we can hope for out of the NDP is to be the official opposition in any position federally. And, it's ridiculous because they could get it together. They could run the country. There'd be some growing pains there, and I think they'd be worth going through those growing pains, because this conservative liberal trade-off, which is 100% of the history of Canada, is just get bored with the Conservatives, vote in the Liberals. Get bored with the Liberals, vote in the Conservative.
Yeah.
We've got this. We've learned nothing from history. This is the definition of insanity, and Canadians are still doing it. So the NDP are a viable option. Unfortunately, I think that the NDP don't understand the level of racism there is in Canada, because of the three main candidates, Singh is by far the best individual in all of that. He is, when he talks about addiction, I understand him. It's like he's talking from an educated perspective on that, and I absolutely understand it, and I support that. When he's talking about climate change issues, he's on it. He understands the science, and so he's a good man. He's a good man for the job, and I don't think he's corrupt. But at the same time, there would be some growing pains. NDP has some things to learn about actually becoming the federal government, and the one thing every government every prime minister, everybody learns when they get to office is who they owe for the privilege of being in office.
Yeah.
You would think they would think that they owe the people that voted for them. But it appears to me, once they get in office, they realize it's not so much the people that voted for them as a half a dozen to 25 specific companies that they owe for them.
What about with the Liberals? What are your concerns there?
Well, I think that SNC-Lavalin thing, which unfortunately is, it's both a conservative and liberal problem historically, but right now it's falling on the feet of the liberals, and that is really too bad because I think Justin screwed up. He didn't keep some of his election promises, so the people in the center and on the left aren't thrilled about him not putting through any kind of election reform, which I never believed he was going to do for a second. And his buying the pipeline, I think that's up. It's funny because he did it for the right-wing oil people who will never like him no matter what. And Rachel's pushing of that cost her dearly on the left when she was trying to placate a bunch of people who will never respect her no matter what. So Trudeau has that problem as well. He did some really big favors for the oil industry, but they will never appreciate that. And he's losing a lot of his base, as I mentioned. Right now, it looks like they're losing Liberals to the Green Party, and I think that's a wonderful move for Canada. More Green Party people would be great. However, it's looking like the Green Party are going to be a bit of a spoiler for vote splitting as well.
I've often said that when I talk politics with people, I've often said that if we're not happy with, so for example, what happened in Ontario, a lot of people weren't happy with the Liberals near the end, and I think it was more so about the leader as opposed to the Liberals.
Yes, Wynne was awfully unpopular, and for good reason too.
Yeah, and so instead of, I look at it as, and you touched on it sort of being a level of madness, wherein a conversation I would have with people, I'm like, okay, so if you're not happy with the current leader, then and you want things to change, then maybe it would be more beneficial to send a message to Ottawa by voting for the Greens or voting for an independent candidate. If enough people, the Greens may not win, but if there's a huge uptake in the number of people who vote for the Greens, then whoever's in power is going to have to take notice and recognize, hold on a second here, something's happening. I need to pay attention. Enough people vote for independents as opposed to people who are along party lines, then again, whoever gets in is going to have to stop and consider what exactly is happening and realize that people want something that's going to be different than business as usual. But we seem to be stuck in this three-party no man's land.
Yes.
And everybody
it's really a two-party thing. Like, there's only two parties have ever formed the government in Canada.
And all you hear is, the rhetoric you hear is, I don't like the leader, but I've always voted for this, so, my father voted for this, so I'm going to, I'm going to vote for this. And then
kind of like the States where somebody votes for Eisenhower because Lincoln won the bloody war. Like, they have something to do with each other at this point, but people think that way.
So we end up in a situation that is a bit of a mess. And I look at this, and the federal election that is coming up is like you said, it is a bit. I think it's a very pivotal point in Canadian history, from a climate change perspective, from our social justice perspective, like on so many different levels. We're at a critical point. And I'm not so sure if people really fully understand that, or even really taking the time to investigate everybody that's running and making an informed decision as to who it is that they're going to vote for, instead of, I've always been blue, or I've always been red, or I've always been green, or, and then voting along those lines. And then Because we see what that does. We end up in a situation where in Ontario, majority we have a premier that majority of the people really didn't vote for.
Yes, I know. Well, but that's always the case. Is most of the people haven't voted for the person who ends up in office. Half the time, our leaders are people who weren't elected for any office until that election. They were groomed for politics and business, but they didn't enter politics until later in the game. The Jack Layton, Rachel Notley type of politicians that were born to be politicians. They were born to make changes in society. Those are sort of the rarity. A lot of times we're pulling people from a few key law schools in Canada rather than the people who are supposed to be out helping their constituents.
So at this, we've got about 5 minutes left, and at this point, what would you be? I know you've got your hands in quite a few different pots in terms of social justice services, but
I do, yeah.
What are you telling people that they should be doing in order to be prepared for the next election?
Well, when it comes to specific issues, I'm telling people to hit the streets, and I'm trying to get them to do it together. I'm trying to join as many people under the banner of the Extinction Rebellion as I possibly can. I would like Extinction Rebellion to wind up being an umbrella, like Occupy or something like that, an umbrella for all the other organizations. So the organizations actually act as an infestation rather than a bunch of little individual ants. So that's one thing. And for specific issues, I'm getting people to hit the streets. The kids coming out to support the gay straight alliances in school, that's fantastic. My daughter's old school did that here in Edmonton the other day, and it's just fantastic. I have a queer daughter, so it means something to me to see these young kids coming out to support their peers who are gay or trans or whatever. It's wonderful. So I'll do anything I can to help motivate that, and anything to do with climate change at the moment. Anything that can bring out change to government policy on climate change, I will do that right now. Now, other things that I do practically, I'm working with a fellow in the Kivu region of Congo to start a permaculture farm. Part of it will grow hemp so that they can make fabric out of the hemp and sell the fabric rather than just selling the hemp for whatever they can get it for. They'll grow vegetables for the community who's working with the hemp. And they'll grow fruit trees and some other stuff for themselves as well. And this is just a thing I invented right from scratch in Bukavu in the Congo, because they needed something done. Sending the money wasn't going to help anything. So what I get out of it is they're also going to set up a thing where they start looking after the village stray dogs. So my reward for this is they'll take care of the dogs as long as I get them hemp seed and stuff like that going. We're good. We're good.
So with for the average Canadian right now who's sort of looking at the next election that's coming up, or is looking at all everything that's kind of going on, is feeling a little bit disillusioned, or feeling that it's a little bit too much to handle, what would you suggest?
Okay, well, we need to have really mature discussions and really nonpartisan discussions from the center right on down to the further left. We all need to talk together. We need to work together. We need to vote under one banner, whether that is green, or right now might be the time in history for the Greens to come up.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. Let's discuss that maturely, whether it's NDP, whether it's Liberal. What we're going to do. I'm tired of the liberal-conservative dichotomy, so I'd rather anyone other than those two parties at the moment. But we have to get it together. We have to vote as a bloc, because we need to stop this conservative track that we're on right now, and we need to put everything we have into that. So banding together, even recently speaking with anarchist groups and things like that. We got the anarchists and communists and stuff like that out voting for Rachel Notley in the last Alberta election.
Really?
Because they realized the importance of that. Absolutely. And I mean, to understand more responsible anarchists, we believe that we should, sorry, I shouldn't say the royal we, but the belief is that we need to tear this system down and build a better one. In the meantime, we have the system we have, and if we don't participate in that system, we're not going to have a chance to tear down anything, because we will end up like the United States with a more autocratic kind of government and things like that. And after that happens, then your right to protest goes away. Then your right to an opinion goes away. Then all of these negative things sort of fall and limit our freedoms. Mm-hmm. So yes, anarchists for the most part believe that they need to participate in the system if we're going to evolve.
Well, I guess when people hear, talk about anarchists, they might be thinking something else.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. When people think anarchists, they think Mad Max. They don't think of the Paris Commune, which was a fully functioning government of freedom. I mean, anarchists are basically more socially minded libertarians. Mm-hmm. They're libertarians that will put their time and money into community things, whereas actual libertarians would leave the community to figure it out itself.
Wow. I definitely want to say thank you for hanging out with me all the way from Alberta.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
On the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
It's been great talking to you. I know that all the items that we talked about is a concern across the country, and there are a lot of people who are sort of trying to figure out what their next steps are. And I hope that some of the information that we provided today has been able to sort of shed a little light and pique somebody's interest, that they would go and do a little bit more investigation. Cameron,
I hope so too. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Just wanted to say, thank you for hanging out with me this Sunday afternoon. It's definitely been a pleasure. I hope that you continue to shine the light on within your province and throughout Canada, so that everybody will be able to sort of stand up and think logically and educate themselves before the next election. It's been a pleasure having you. Those of you who are online who are listening to me for the last hour or so, I want to thank you for hanging out with me this Sunday afternoon on the Patrick O'Moore Show. Lucia D is going to be up next. And enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
This is Felicia Temple, and you're listening to iLive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio.
Hi, I'm urban Christian artist Kayla James, and you're listening to iLive Radio.
This is Atina, and you're listening to iLive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio.
Hey, this is your boy Isma. You're listening to iLive Radio, supporting independent artists from around the world.
Ready for Rapsalute? We're the #1 hip-hop show in the T-Dot, airing every Monday from 8 p.m. till 10 p.m. on iliveradio.com with your host Amber, alongside DJ Shortcut, Chino, Dean, and Caesar Swift on the ones and twos, representing the culture, the lifestyle, the music, and the DJs.
Hi, this is Steve Aldred from Soul Deep. Tune in every Wednesday on iLive Radio from 6 till 8 p.m. for the best in soulful, deep, and Afro house. Only on iLive Radio. Don't miss it. Soul Deep.
You're listening to iLive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio. iLive Radio.
Pourquoi tu crains rien?